MotoGP 20, we're on Xbox One X, and this is indeed enhanced. So here in the main menu we have a couple options. There's quick modes, we have a career, which is actually quite in depth, which we'll go over later. Multiplayer options for up to 16. We've got historic mode with a lot of depth, more than ever before, and lots of customization. So with this being on Xbox One X, we have options for image configuration. We do have support for HDR and a nit's choice to choose between, and we can choose between high frame rate and high quality. We'll show off both of them, but we'll start with high frame rate, and then once we're into gameplay we'll actually dive into more of what each of these actually do. So in the game, with the two options, quality gives us that 60 FPS, whereas resolution, which we're not showing yet, has improved scenery, tarmac, sky, lighting, vegetation, and has enhanced visual damage to the bikes in the game. So a big part of the change in this one, at least this time around, is to the bike models and also some of the background elements of actually managing your team, because we've got like full staff, full player models for the actual staff, and some scanned in actual individuals into the experience in order to make like the engineering aspect of it prior to a race and during the race feel a little bit more realistic to what the actual competition is going to be like. So yeah, to look at the visuals here, and again this is the high FPS option with a number of the competitors on the track at the same time. We actually do get a fairly good looking world. The track looks nice, and the new and improved 3D models for the various racers are actually very well done and look quite authentic even in the lower obvious resolution options. And we'll show again the comparison later on so that you can see the look between the two. So now I'm not the best at these biking titles just because it's not something I necessarily play, but I hope I am kind of showcasing a little bit of what to expect. I do find that for the most part it does handle quite well for a biking title, and features some pretty intense and gnarly crashes going on there, which are kind of crazy to see. You get a cool camera perspective on those, and I think they're generally well handled. So with the race kind of tarmac and the character models and the close proximity looking well, I do note that in the backdrop, aside from like clouds, oh here we go, great kind of thing, and this does include a rewind feature, which I think is somewhat of an essential thing that modern racing titles should include in them. Some of the backdrop doesn't look quite as realistic as it potentially could, just in comparison to some of the other racing titles that I've seen over the generation, especially since we are towards the end of it. The trees, they look alright and stuff, and the crowd looks fine, but I feel like they could have went a little bit further. That being said, they have a great sense of scale and authenticity to the various tracks that you get to play on. So there actually are a number of there's a good number of options for the racing. I do wish that we had more options when it comes to the actual tracks in regards to how many tracks there are and just like the layouts and stuff like that, but I do think that they give a fair selection of options when it comes to actually racing on all of these tracks and kind of going along from that point. So I think that aspect is kind of handled well. Now we're going to talk about a number of the other features in the game. So they have they want to be ready for the full season, the 2020 season, and they go in depth with managerial modes and the way that you kind of pick contracts. And it's a really in-depth sort of campaign that you can play through. And I say campaign, I mean more like it's called the career mode, right? Because that's what they do for these types of games. You have a career. So you actually get to pick sponsorships, you have certain targets that you're trying to work towards. And I think they handled that quite well, and in a very dynamic and interesting sort of way that works perfectly for what this kind of thing is. And I think fans that are expecting that sort of style of gameplay are going to be pleased with what they're getting by covering that element of it. I just think that they did a really good job on making something that feels a little bit larger in style, just in terms of the maps themselves, seeing the carving out of the course and everything like that. I think that's very well done. But we're going to switch over and we're going to show off the other visual options so you get an idea of what that's like. So now we're starting with the the high resolution quality, which we kind of talked about earlier in terms of features, and I kind of pushed it a little bit harder by throwing in the rain, just so you can see what that is kind of like when it comes to the gameplay. So, like I was saying, you kind of get to manage your team. They've got a really in-depth kind of career option to play this, but they also have these nice kind of quick play options. So we're actually in just a quick kind of setup here. So you can do a quick tournament. You can adjust things such as like how in depth you want to go. Do you want to do the trials? Do you want to jump right to the race? How many laps you want to have? They do a good job of that. There's also a really nice sort of scrolling option when it comes to choosing how difficult you want your opponents to be, and I should actually honestly make it a little bit easier on myself because I am not an intense competing biker. Basically, that's what this is. So yeah, I think they do a pretty good job in regards to content. You've also got like sort of Grand Prix you can do. They've got the time trials, which we'll show off a little bit later on, so you can kind of see how that action is going. So they also have this nice option called, you know, the historic mode, which features 46 unique bikers that are historic bikers. That's funny, little crash there. And then they also have 43 kind of historic bikes to choose from. I love kind of seeing the wipeout angles. They do a great job on that camera aspect of this. So we'll talk also about the multiplayer. The multiplayer up to 16 players racing at once. They have dedicated servers, and they have a neural AI when it comes to, you know, kind of how the AI bikers and stuff are reacting. And I think that's kind of a neat system to have implemented because they do a fairly good job in this game in regards to giving you a good competition. And it's nice that they have so many modes that you can actually kind of play through. I think they cover basically all of the essentials when it comes to why am I having so much trouble with this curve here. It's ridiculous. So yeah, other features of improvements in this one are extreme realism upgrades. Why do I keep crashing? It's like a really tough corner. Extreme realism with 70 plus bikes, asymmetrical tire consumption, and they've got you know, aerodynamic damages to vehicles. I think that's kind of cool, and they've done a really good job on like the wipeouts and stuff. I think that looks very good in this. So in general, a lot of really good improvements to the overall game and the experience with lots of changes and tweaks. It's generally just a more polished and upgraded version of the game that I think kind of hits the mark when it comes to a lot of elements of the overall package and what it provides. Because I mean, if you're looking at getting this one, you're wondering, you know, what's new, what are the upgrades on this. But if you are a new player for the first time and you're kind of like into what this type of sporting event is, I think it does encompass like the full scope of the competition, and also provide some extra optional modes on top of that so you can go a little bit more in depth, because it's kind of almost ridiculous. And I love the extra layering they've done in regards to like even before a race is set up, how you like kind of like can tweak your team, how you can manage things, how you can change all these settings. I think the UI is nice and clean, and there are lots of options in regards to actually customizing how that looks further, if that's your sort of thing. But we are going to switch over to another track so you can see a little bit different gameplay action. So I did want to show off the customization briefly. I'm not going to click into the rider stats because I have it all personalized for myself, but I'm going to show off some aspects of play. So they've got a lot of kind of helmets and gear and everything you choose from, and then they've also got this sort of online thing where you can actually download more options and creations in order to further customize how your character looks. And it's actually really impressive for what I consider to be almost a niche sort of title when it comes to racing, because there's so many different racing games, and a lot of the titles that are smaller, you know, you don't see that, like there's Forza and stuff, you know, that they're really in depth, but these ones usually don't go this far. Like these color range options are fantastic. You can change all the different like little spots of your character, the boots and the suit and the overall style and that, and I think that's really quite well done and impressive to see this extra step to create something that has more personalization to it, and then allowing online content sharing too to push that further. I think that's a really good extra to have in this experience that rounds out the experience a little bit more for the individual, for you when you're coming in and playing this. So we went back up to the 60 FPS mode just to show off time trial, just so you get a little bit more gameplay context and get to see a little bit more of what the experience is. But overall, I'm quite pleased with what they presented here. It's got a well-rounded amount of content. I think the new changes are going to really please fans and those that are interested in this. There's so many tweaks in regards to like changing the writing settings and how it plays and how it looks. And I mean, I think, some of the visual qualities could be pushed a little bit further, but I'm not really going to complain because this is, what I consider to be a smaller title, and I think the amount of features that they've added here in regards to like the historic settings, the managerial stuff, the competitive play options that you get, that more than makes up for, irregularity there, more than makes up for some things like visually in the backdrop. That being said, I think they could push those, especially since we are towards the end of the gen, and this is going to be one of the last, if not perhaps the last one we see on this generation. Probably next year would be, I would imagine, before things completely move over, because you always got to think next gen ahead. But this is a really fine offering that I think they've done a pretty good job on. Runs smoothly, looks more than good enough, especially if you're just like a casual player or even like a serious one. You're not really going to care too much about the outside things that I point out, but they are things that I do actually look for when I am checking out these kind of games to give an opinion and stuff on. But I think they cover all the serious angles, and then you're also able to tweak those if you want them more intense, because I imagine some more hardcore players kind of look at how I play and stuff and just be like all mad about it. But I am just trying to showcase just the regular version when you get it out of the box, and I mean, you can tweak it a lot further within the settings. I think we got a clean UI, we got a really good looking new improvements to the actual player models, lots of customization, which is always appreciated for players of games. I mean, customization's everything in all titles, and the fact that they go so in depth with this one, I do actually really appreciate that, and I think many fans and other players will as well. I think that all the little settings when it comes to managing your own little team and all that, I think that's going to be really cool, and a lot of people are going to like trying that out and working through a career in here. You can play a lot of gameplay if you sit here and do all the laps and stuff. It's not necessarily something that I'm 100% into gameplay wise style, but I can take a look at this and be like, okay, this is like a good solid biking game. It's kind of fun to roll around on. I can see the audience type for this one and why they would enjoy this type of experience, and I think you're going to be very happy with the improvements coming from last year's version onto this one, because I did play 19. I played a number of the other biking titles from the group, so I do have a sort of sphere of comparison that I can actually make when I am checking these games out. And I just think that they've done a pretty good job with this one overall, and I've quite enjoyed it.